Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Retro Pro Wrestling Show. This is CJ from RetroProWrestling.com, and today I will be your host as we look back at what I consider to be a largely underappreciated Survivor Series elimination match between the Underdogs and the Bodydonnas. It is November, it is Thanksgiving week. This Saturday, Survivor Series 2024 comes to us live with that big Bloodline War Games match. But today, I want to take you back all the way to 1995 and a match which may not have been a headline attraction, but which made for one heck of a pay-per-view opener as the likes of Candido, Louie Spicolli, Sean Waltman, the 1-2-3 Kid, Barry, Horowitz, Bob Holly, and more, all mixed it up and really kind of mixed it up and made a fantastic match that I still love to this day. This is a 4-part episode. In part 1, we will put this match into the context of the World Wrestling Federation as it was at the time, which in 1995 was not great. In part 2, I'll let you in on what I loved about this match the first time I saw it and what I continue to love about it to this day. Part 3, we will break down the participants involved. And finally, in part 4, we will get to the match itself. So, if you are only interested in hearing about the bell-to-bell stuff, you can skip ahead. I would rather you do that than be mad at me for taking too long to get into it. Speaking of getting into it, let's do that right now. So, before we get to the opening bell, let's look at this match within the context of the WWF at the time. And the WWF at the time was famously in a low point. Yes, that was the year that we had some all-time classics like the Razor Ramon, Shawn Michaels ladder match sequel. But it was also the year that we had Savio Vega wrestling 3 times at the King of the Ring, only to get beat by Mabel. It was the year that Mabel, you remember Mabel, Viscera, Big Daddy V, that guy. It was a year that Mabel became main eventer, King Mabel, and feuded with WWF champion Big Daddy Cool Diesel. It was the year that Bret Hart, former world champion, and one of the top 2 most talented guys on the roster at the time, spent his entire summer wrestling Jerry Lawler's demented dentist. It was the year of The Undertaker versus Kama Mustafa, which, I haven't thought about those matches in years, and even just mentioning them brings back horrible nightmares of how horrible those matches were. You get my point, right? 1995 was rough. And today we are looking at a match from that year's Survivor Series, which features a crew of guys who were not very high up on the WWF pecking order at that time. It's a match full of guys who were barely scraping the mid-card at this point, and yet they all turned out what happened to just be one of the best opening Survivor Series matches you may have ever seen. I don't know. I really enjoyed this match, and I want to tell you why I enjoyed it for 2 reasons. The first time I saw this match, I was 11 years old, and I loved it because I loved wrestling, and I was still in that happy place in a wrestling fan's life when all wrestling is just great. When I was 11, there was no such thing as a good match or a bad match. All matches were good matches because they were wrestling matches, and I just loved wrestling. At that time in my life, Big Daddy Cool Diesel was my favourite wrestler of all time, and I snapped the head off my British Bulldog Hasbro action figure when Dastardly Davy turned on my number 1 guy. That's the kind of fan I was. I was into this. I knew it wasn't quite real, but I was still so swept up in the kayfabe of it all that, yeah, if you fuck with Diesel, I'm gonna with your action figure. And then I watched it a couple of times since, and I just think it is an incredibly entertaining match. So, without further ado, let's get down to the US Air Arena in Maryland on November the 19th, 1995, and take a look at the Bodydonnas versus the Underdogs. So, we are live at Survivor Series, and our commentators are a pre-cowboy hat Jim Ross, Vince, what a maneuver, McMahon, and the returning Mr. Perfect. The opening bell for the show rings, and it's time for the participants in our opening contest to head to the ring. So what I thought would be fun here is if we just talk a little bit about each guy and where they are around November 1995, which will give this match better context and, to an extent, kind of explain how the whole thing came together. So we start with the good guys, the baby faces, the team of the Underdogs. And just the name of their team gives you some idea of the level of star power, or lack thereof, that we're talking about here. This is a team of underdogs. This is a team that nobody even expects to win anyway. I mean, I get the idea that people like to root for the underdog, but just putting it out there like that without an ounce of subtlety, you might as well just move the timeline forward a few years and call them the Job Squad. First up is Marty Jannetty, who is perhaps most famous for being the Marty Jannetty of the Rockers. Full disclaimer, Marty Jannetty was my first ever favourite wrestler, back when I was like 8 or 9 years old. At this point, he's back in the company, but he'd yet to do really anything of note other than losing to Goldust in Goldust's WWF debut. And at this point, he is still a few months away from forming the New Rockers with Al Snow. One final note on Jannetty, there is a video out there of the Midnight Rockers cutting a heel promo that I think was in the AWA or was in Memphis Wrestling, I think maybe in Memphis, where the Rockers are heels and Marty Jannetty cuts this killer heel promo, and you watch that and you can see why some people had Jannetty pegged as the breakout star of that team. If I can find that video, I will definitely add it to the notes for this episode. But for now, let's move on because Marty Jannetty is accompanied by Bob Sparkplug Holly. By the way, I want to give a shout out to you if you lived in England in the 1990s and you were responsible for publishing something called Who the Hell is Bob Holly? It was either a newsletter or a fanzine, and you were handing out flyers to promote Who the Hell is Bob Holly at a WWF event in UK sometime between 96 and possibly 1999. My buddy and I, we got your flyer, we thought the name was hilarious, and to this day, Who the Hell is Bob Holly remains an inside joke between us. I'm afraid we never did get your newsletter, however, and I am sorry. I wanted to say all that because, to be honest, that little anecdote was far more interesting than anything Bob Holly was doing in 1995. Or possibly ever. I'm just joking. Also on Team Underdogs, we had Hakushi. Hakushi had arrived in the World Wrestling Federation at the tail end of 1994 and had a brief tag run and breakup feud with Kwang. And if you say that you remember that, you're a liar. He had gone from having what I remember being an awesome match against Bret Hart at one of the In Your House events to being lumbered in a three-way storyline with Bodydonnas, Skip, and Barry Horowitz. Hakushi was aligning with Skip and Sonny, but then both Hakushi and Skip lost to Barry Horowitz, and then Hakushi suddenly became friends with Barry Horowitz, and Barry Horowitz was teaching Hakushi about how to be more American or something, and that's how he ended up on this team. And speaking of Horowitz, he was, of course, our final and ultimate underdog. Barry Horowitz, you know about him. He spent most of his career looking up at the lights, which was turned into a story where he started feuding with Candido and eventually would end up leaving the WWF and looking up at the lights in WCW. And this formidable foursome is set to take on the quintessentially evil quartet of the Bodydonnas, led, of course, by Skip and Sonny. Skip and Sonny had, of course, come from Smoky Mountain Wrestling and were doing this whole fitness guru gimmick that kind of today would have been like a influencer kind of gimmick. And I do think it's a shame that they kind of saddled them with this, because I'm a big fan of Chris Candido. I thought he was a tremendous wrestler. And, you know, even his team with Dr. Tom Prichard, when they were the Bodydonnas team, was, I think if you'd put them against different opponents and stripped away the stupid gimmick, they would have got a lot more credit than they actually got for the short time that they were together. And of course, Skip is here with Sonny, God bless her, leading the charge and patronizing the crowd on her way to the ring. They are joined by Radford, the late great Louie Spicolli, who had gone from being Madonna's boyfriend to being the grunge-rocking alleged boyfriend of Courtney Love. That was his new gimmick. He was a grunge rocker, he was Courtney Love's boyfriend. But anyway, we won't go down that hole right now because life is a mystery and who knows where that will lead. There was a whole thing where Radford was really trying to get in with Skip and Sonny, and they called him a Bodydonna in training. But I think that Skip and Sonny were just kind of using Radford. Spicolli and Candido had previously feuded in Smoky Mountain, so the two were clearly used to working together. But it didn't go very far, at least not in the WWF. Spicolli would wrap up the last few years of his career in ECW and WCW. And then we have Dr. Tom Prichard, formerly of the Heavenly Bodies, who hadn't actually competed in the WWF for about a year at this point. And I don't recall at the time there being any storyline, rhyme, or reason why he was involved in the match. This was about a month before he would cut his hair and dye it blonde and become Bodydonna Zip. So I don't know if this was just a way of getting him and Candido working together or whatever. But there he was, there was good old Dr. Tom. The final participant of the Bodydonnas was supposed to be Jean-Pierre Lafitte the Pirate, but it was instead the 1, 2, 3 Kid, who had recently turned heel on his old buddy Razor Ramon. You know about the 1, 2, 3 Kid. He was an enhancement talent who famously upset Razor Ramon. Ramon turned face. The two were friends for a couple of years, even though their storylines don't always necessarily intertwine. Eventually, they team up to challenge for the tag team titles, but they lose that match to then champions Billy and Bart the Smoking Guns. Kid gets mad, and then he's put in as a special guest referee for Razor Ramon's match against Psycho Sid of the $1 Million Corporation. And guess what? The special referee turns on Razor, sides with Sid, sides with Ted DiBiase, and is now a heel as part of the $1 Million Corporation. So, Kid comes down as the final member of the team, and the announcers tell us that Ted DiBiase has bought off Jean-Pierre Lafitte. And Kid comes down and he's flashing the Click to Sweet sign on his way to the ring, but he barely makes it down before Razor Ramon comes rushing out for revenge. He's stopped, of course, by a gaggle of officials. Mike Chioda's there, Gerald Briscoe's there, a couple of others there that you might recognize, and they come and they haul Razor to the back. See what I did there? They haul, as in, they drag him to the back. Never mind. They hauled Razor to the back, and the 1, 2, 3 Kid makes it to the ring, where Ted DiBiase reminds him, of course, that it's all about the money. And then the future European champion embraces his teammates and loses a game of rock, paper, scissors to Tom Prichard. This means that Prichard starts things off for the Bodydonnas against my boy, Marty Jannetty. And here is where the fun begins. So Jannetty and Prichard circle. They lock up, and Dr. Tom gets Jannetty in the heel corner, only for Marty to come out swinging. It's the very opening minute of the match, and he's knocking guys off the apron, throwing them around with big old back body drop, and basically he's just taking out the entire Bodydonnas team single-handedly. They come at him, he takes him down, the crowds are excited, they're into it, and the more they're into it, the more Marty Jannetty kicks ass, and the more Marty Jannetty kicks ass, the more they're into it. And Vince McMahon's yelling, he's like, Marty Jannetty is on fire! And you know what? He absolutely was. Again, if the point of an opening match is to get the crowd pumped up, the Bodydonnas versus Underdogs match got off to a perfect start. The crowd were pumped. Anyway, Marty Jannetty and Tom Prichard changed places with Bob Holly for the Underdogs and Rad Radford for the Bodydonnas. And yet, I'd say there's not the slightest dip of quality in this match. They do the whole standard spot, the shoot off the ropes, the shoulder tackle, drop down, leap over, hit a move. And in this particular instance, that move is a surprising Hurricane Rana from old Sparky Plug. It wasn't necessarily the smoothest Hurricane Rana you've ever seen in your life, but you don't cover 20, 30 years of WWE history without covering a lot of Bob Holly matches. And I don't recall a single other time than this when he's pulled out a Hurricane Rana. Then again, I don't really recall a single Bob Holly match, so maybe that explains a lot. I am so unnecessarily harsh on Bob Holly, and I do apologize. The point is that the action flowed smoothly and remained solid. After they do the Hurricane Rana, they go back to the well, tackle, drop down, leapfrog. This time, Holly catches Radford with an equally impressive powerbomb. A powerbomb that was just as impressive as that Hurricane Rana. It was a short exchange, but at this level and at this stage of the match, it was just, I don't know, there's something that I find very satisfying about watching two wrestlers who clearly know what they're doing, just going out and doing it. It wasn't overly flashy, but I feel like a wrestling trainer could show a newcomer that exchange as a good example of, this is how you do the fundamentals and make them look good. Moving on, Holly tags out to Hakushi, and that's where things start to go wrong. So Hakushi gets picked up by Rad Radford and just splattered onto the mat until he is dead. Or at least until the 1-2-3 Kid had finished tagging in and hits him with a frog splash. Kid gets 2 on the frog splash and tags out to Skip, who sets Hakushi up for a back suplex off the top rope. Hakushi's in trouble, but oh no, wait, no he isn't, because he reverses this back suplex into a crossbody and makes a desperate tag to Big Bad Bob Holly. Wasting absolutely no time, Holly storms the ring and soon gets into running the ropes with Skip. It's kind of the same thing that he did with Rad Radford, which may sound a little repetitive, but this one had way more leapfrogs in it, and it ended with one of those big back body drops, an arm drag, and a couple of ferocious clotheslines from Bob Holly that nearly took Skip's head off. Seriously, for all of the crap that I've talked about Bob Holly, he is absolutely my favorite guy in this match so far. He is just storming in and kicking ass and throwing out moves left and right. Take it from me. Underdogs versus Bodydonnas, Survivor Series 1995. Bob Holly is not messing about. Unfortunately, neither are his opponents. Holly ends up in the wrong part of town, he gets ganged up on, and he gets driven into the mat by the new legal man for the Bodydonnas, Dr. Tom Prichard. The referee counts. 1. Bob Holly is down. 2. But Bob Holly is not out. He kicks out, but then immediately gets slammed down to the mat again by Prichard, who next attempts a moonsault. Holly narrowly moves out of the way, runs to the top rope, and I mean runs to the top rope, and he flies into Prichard, eliminating him from the match with a flying body press. Now, sure, you're not going to miss that whole aerial high spot with the moonsault and the body press as any kind of lucha libre masterclass, but this was still good, entertaining pro wrestling in a match where it was abundantly clear that every single wrestler had their work boots on. Not that it mattered much for Bob Holly what kind of boots he wore, because with Tom Prichard eliminated, Skip slides in, catches Holly with the most devastating move in pro wrestling, the roll-up, and with that, he pins Bob Holly. 1, 2, 3. So now Radford is gone. Now Tom Prichard is gone, and now Bob Holly is gone, and we are back at 3 men per team. In Bob Holly's place comes Hakushi, and he comes in, confidently takes the fight right to Candido, taking him down with a couple of kicks and attempting a Vader bomb. Alas, once again, this proved not to be the Japanese star's night. Skip got the knees up, and for the second time in the match, Hakushi was on the losing end of the fight. And then comes my absolute favourite spot in this match. A spot that is a little bit silly, but I also feel perfectly encapsulates everything that I love about this match. So let me explain. So Skip is groggy after taking a couple of hard educated feet to the noggin from your man Hakushi, but he's still in better shape than his opponent because Hakushi is winded from those knees to the breadbasket. He gets Big Hack up on the ropes and he pulls off this crowd popping Hurricane Rana from the top rope. It's the top rope Hurricane Rana, and it's such an impressive move that Candido decides to celebrate. He pops up, raises his hand in the air, and then it's like, yeah, boom, as the toll of the battle catches up with him and he face plants the canvas, Ric Flair style. Honestly, that makes me chuckle every single time I see it. But the real reason I love this spot in this match is because it so perfectly combines the two things that make this match so enjoyable: good wrestling and crowd-pleasing entertainment. That top rope Hurricane Rana was absolutely textbook, and then the whole thing transitions into this comedy bit with Candido doing the splat. It was the perfect spot for this type of match, a match that is excelling in its main goal of entertaining the crowd, but still giving us quality pro wrestling. Anyway, Skip is still somehow first to his feet after that spot, and he tags out to the 1, 2, 3 kid. In storms Mr. Waltman, picking up where Skip left off and keeping up the assault by stamping on his opponent's head. We then get this brief but enjoyable exchange between Kid and Hakushi, who had fought so many times during Hakushi's brief run with the WWF. They had a match at SummerSlam 95. They had a match on Raw, I think on Superstars as well. And if you look at, something like Cage Match, you'll see that there was a lot of Hakushi versus 1, 2, 3 Kid matches. So it shouldn't be too surprising to learn that you take two guys like Sean Waltman and Hakushi, give them even a small bit of time in the ring, and you know you're going to get good stuff. I think in terms of, what we often call in-ring talent, when we refer to moves and physical talent as in-ring talent, I think Kid and Hakushi are among my two favorites from this time period. Am I saying Hakushi weird, by the way? I feel like I am. Let me know. So Kid and Hakushi were two of my favorites from this time. So as short as it was, for me, this was just another highlight in a match filled with bright spots. Unfortunately, it all ends after Hakushi had regained control of the match. He slams Kid down, he dives off the top rope, Kid rolls out of the way, Hakushi splats on the canvas, and the 1-2-3 Kid tags out to Mr. Radford. And as he leaves the ring, Kid shows us, remember, he's only just turned heel. So he shows us that he really is a super, super bad guy now by doing the most heelish of all heelish things. Sneak attacking Hakushi with a kick to the head behind the referee's back. Radford pounces atop Hakushi, the referee counts, and Hakushi is 1, 2, 3, out of there. So now we're down to 3 versus 2 as the literal underdogs of Barry Horowitz and Marty Jannetty find themselves up against the formidable threesome of Bodydonnas Skip, Radford, and the 1-2-3 Kid. The crowd, whose enthusiasm had not yet wavered once, they popped big as Horowitz rushed into the ring for the first time in the contest to replace Hakushi. However, instead of focusing on his opponent, the gallant babyface of course decided to check on Hakushi instead. See, this was during a dark time in professional wrestling history where all the heroes were basically gullible idiots who did dumb things for the sake of being a real good guy, but always suffered the consequences. Case in point, Barry Horowitz, a veteran who really should know better by now, turns his back on his opponent to check on Hakushi and just ends up getting the ever-loving bejeebus beaten out of him by Radford and the 1-2-3 Kid. So what we have here now is essentially a handicap match with Horowitz taking on the babyface in peril role and Radford and Kid doing most of the heavy lifting for their team, while Skip basically stands around on the side barking out orders. And this was all playing out as a plot point in the story of Radford being a Bodydonna in training. It was essentially Candido saying, hey, I'm in charge here. You want in my inner circle? You destroy my arch nemesis, Barry Horowitz, and you do it exactly as I say. I don't know if Barry Horowitz had ever been anybody's arch nemesis before, but he was certainly Skip's, and Skip was making sure that Radford took him out. Except, of course, he didn't, because this plan backfired horribly. At one point, Mr. Radfordson looked to have Horowitz beaten, but when he went to cover him, Skip ordered Radford to dish out more punishment. So we got the 1 count, we got the 2 count. Before the referee could count to 3, Skip's like, nope, pull him up, keep beating him up. Then Skip lets the power go to his head, and he demands that Radford prove himself worthy of being a Bodydonna by doing press-ups while his opponent, who is still in the match, lies out and takes a breather on the canvas. So while Radford's looking at Skip, and while Radford's looking at Skip, do we have to do this now and I can just pin the guy and then do some press-ups for you? Horowitz obviously revives himself just long enough to blindside Radford with a small package and send him to the showers. So, it's 2 versus 2, but not for long. Almost immediately, Kid tags in, hits Horowitz from behind, and then knee drops him and pins him. So what we're left with here is Marty Jannetty versus the 1-2-3 Kid and Skip. And this is where the match starts to slowly build to its apex. And man, what a build it is. So Jannetty has this great back and forth exchange with Candido, where the Bodydonna keeps prevailing, keeps getting the upper hand on Jannetty, but no matter what punishment he dishes out, Marty Jannetty will not die. Every time he's down, he kicks out. Every time he kicks out, the crowd pop huge. They are willing this underdog babyface on until he finally regains control of the match, hitting Skip with a top rope powerbomb. Remember, this is the WWF in 1995. You did not see top rope powerbombs in the WWF in 1995. At least not very often. And, just to see them break that out, I remember even at the time watching this as a kid, that's one of the reasons why this instantly became one of my favorite matches. Like, holy crap, did you just see that? He did a top rope powerbomb. It was impressive even watching it back now. And it was enough to send Skip packing to the locker rooms. But Kid picks up the pace for his team as he and Jannetty continue working the crowds into a frenzy. Kid rocks Jannetty with a spinning heel kick. He comes cannonballing off the top rope and the crowds explode as Jannetty moves out of harm's way. They are fully behind him for the win here. And Jannetty really looked like he might pull it off too. He seized control of the match and he looked moments away from victory until Big Psycho Sid arrived on the scene. Sid was, of course, aligned with the $1 Million Corporation, and he saunters down to the ringside area. Ted DiBiase distracts the referee. Sid murders Jannetty. Kid gets the pin, and that is that. And in the ring, Kid runs up and he jumps into Sid's arms, and this would kick off a thing where they had like a tag team or a union thing where it was Sid and Kid, and Sid's really big and Kid's quite small, and isn't this an interesting combination? But as they were celebrating, the cameras cut backstage where a furious Razor Ramon was seen hurling monitors around, while Fatu and Savio Vega and I think Henry Godwin were all trying to calm him down. Razor was not happy about this. 1-2-3 Kid was the sole survivor of the match, and Razor wanted blood. And that was it. It was the end of the match. And that was it. It was the end of a fantastic match that combined storytelling with fantastic wrestling and a super hot crowd. It's a match that serves as one of the few high points of a very, very low year in the World Wrestling Federation. A match that I think is underappreciated, but that I would really implore you to go out and watch yourself. It is the Underdogs versus the Bodydonnas, the opening match for Survivor Series 1995. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. I hope you've enjoyed this dive back to the Survivor Series. Next week in episode 4 of the Retro Pro Wrestling Show, we're going to jump forward to 2004 for the WWE No Mercy pay-per-view. And I just want to point out here that whilst a lot of these early episodes of this podcast are all focused on WWE shows, Future episodes will, of course, feature other promotions like WCW, ECW, the AWA, and more. So if you enjoy listening to this, please do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and I will see you very soon. Goodbye.